Hello YouTube, this is Carlos the Rook coming at you from Game 3 of the World Open 2025 in Philadelphia. In this round, I'm playing Rishi, who's rated 1581 and I'm rated 1810. So after losing the first two games, I dropped down to the bottom of the section. And this is the under 2000 section we're playing in, and I got the lowest opponent. Let me flip the board back. Now we're ready. So I started off with e4, c5 goes into Sicilian defense, knight to f3, a6. Now I heard Levy, Gotham Chess, talking about the a6 Sicilian is what he likes to play, but I never seen the a6 Sicilian, so it took me completely out of my opening prep and I didn't know what to do. Here, the move is c4. So the idea is whenever black does not attack the e4 pawn, you set up c4 with the Maroczy bind. That's thematic for white. So I didn't do that. I went to d4, c captures d4, knight captures d4. Now I gave black time to hit me knight f6 hitting e4, and I responded knight to c3. So this is inferior to the Maroczy bind, which is a better setup against the a6 Sicilian. Now black goes e5. So we're going into, I believe it's a Shcherbnikov. Well, I can't go knight to b5 because he hits the a6. So black's gives us a better version of that opening. So I contemplated between knight to b3 and knight to f5 here. Rejected knight to b3, even though that's where in the Najdorf, which is my opening, the knight goes. But I thought knight to f5 would be more aggressive. And it turns out that was the wrong move. Because just like in the Najdorf, the response to knight to f5 is d5. And I know this, and I should have played better. I just wasn't playing good in the first three games of this tournament. Now here, I went bishop g5. Because I felt like I could pin the knight so the knight doesn't take the pawn on e4. Rishi plays d4. And here I panicked because I thought I was losing a piece. All I had to do was bishop captures knight on f6, g captures f6, knight to b1, and the position holds. It's not pretty, but I don't lose a piece if I do this. Instead, I went knight to d5, which is just horrible because I'm losing a piece because the e4 pawn cannot protect both knights. It's overloaded. Bishop captures f5, knight captures f6, g captures f6, hitting my bishop. Bishop captures, queen captures, pawn captures, queen captures f5, and I'm down a piece. I got a piece for a pawn. So bishop to d3 hitting the queen, trying to generate some activity. Queen retreats to d7. And here the computer likes e4 better. Queen to h5, I wanted to be active, hitting the pawn on e5, generating some threats of my own. Bishop to b4 check. I step up king e2. I didn't like c3 because then d captures c3 and my bishop's hanging and c captures b2 coming with a discovery checked on the king, and I felt like the position would collapse if I do that. So knight to c6, black's bringing in his extra piece. a3, asking the bishop what it wants to do. Bishop retreats to d6. Bring my rook on a to e1 because I want to line it up against the king. Knight to e7. Black is rerouting the knight. King to d1. Figure I can manually castle over to the queen side. Black cross castles. Losing a pawn in doing so. And I take the pawn since I'm down a piece. Now it's a piece for two pawns. I feel like this gave me better chances of hitting a draw. One thing that's very important when you're playing chess is to know what you're playing for. In this position, I'm down a piece. So actually it's a piece for two pawns now. So I'm just playing for a draw. I'm not playing for a win no longer. Even though I'm stronger than my opponent, I messed up in the opening. He played an opening I wasn't familiar with. I made a mistake. And so I'm down material. So I'm just playing for a draw. Black is playing for the win. White is playing to hold a draw. So as long as you keep this in mind, you know what you're aiming for. And that makes it more feasible to making good moves. Black brings the rook over to d8, hitting the queen. I drop back with a check. I figured black would block, and then I'll reroute the queen to e6. I don't want to trade. I'm down a piece. I don't want to trade pieces. I want to trade pawns. So I can't believe, I can't remember which master said it. I've read various chess books. But when you down a piece, you trade pawns, not pieces. Queen of d7, trying to trade. Once again, repeat the moves. Hey, I'll take a draw here. So I'll repeat the position. Black doesn't repeat because he's winning, of course. And I go f3 to restrict the pawn on e5. Black comes knight to f5. His idea is to hit the fork on e3, and that knight becomes a monster. I sidestep the fork with king c1. Knight to e3 anyway. Hitting the pawn on g2, so black gets his pawn back. I drop back queen b3, putting pressure along the b file. And here, he surprised me. Rishi plays king to a7 instead of taking the pawn on g2. I'm not sure why he did that. Was he seeing some type of ghost? Because my idea was to bring the bishop to e4 and putting pressure, but I really couldn't do nothing. So I go rook on h to g1, protecting the pawn on g file. He brings his rook over, rook to e2, over protecting. Rook to g7. Okay, now he's about to try and double up the rooks. So I bring the bishop over to e4, and my idea is to push the pawn, protect the pawn on f3, so I can push g4 and stop that rooks doubling up on the g file nonsense. Queen to f7. He wants to trade queens here. I have no choice, because if I don't trade queens, if I try and run, then he gets queen a2 and he drops down to a1, and I'm in really, really bad position then. So I trade. Rook on f captures f7. The engine wanted the other rook to capture. And here I go g4 to stop the pressure on the g file. Black goes bishop e7. King b1. Rook f6. h4. I'm just trying to gain some space here. I want to get the pawn to h5. And just get something rolling on the king side. If I can get these pawns rolling on the king side and create a passed pawn, then that would counter the piece I'm down. Rook to b6. Now black is threatening to hit the pawn on a3 because the pawn on b2 is pinned. So king a2, knight c4. Knight c4, b4, a5. I go bishop d3, knight to e3, bishop captures a5, rook to c6, rook b1. So I'm trying to put pressure down that b file and see if I can get something generated down here on a counterattack. I'm allowing him to take the pawn on h4 because I can swing a rook to h4 and get something going down that file. Because my idea was bishop captures h4, rook on e to h2, bishop retreats to maybe g5, rook captures h7, rook captures h7, bishop captures h7, with the idea of swinging back the bishop to e4 and generating pressure on b7 pawn because the rook on c6 will have to move. So he captures, bishop captures h4, and I moved too fast. I moved the wrong rook. I took the rook on h1. I moved the rook on b1 to h1 instead of the rook on e to h2. Bishop to e7, moving the bishop out the way. So since I made a mistake, I brush it off. Let me double up the rooks and still see if I can still get that pawn. He moved bishop to d6. Rook captures h7. Rook captures h7. Rook captures h7. And here black plays rook c7. He wanted to trade the rooks and alleviate some pressure. Now, I didn't do the trade because I felt like I'm down a piece. I don't want to trade pieces. But after talking to my coach, he said I was supposed to do the trade. And the agent wants me to do the trade because the idea is, let me show you the idea. Hold on. Not there. There was a mouse slip. Rook captures. Bishop captures. G5. And now the knight can't go here to F5 because it captures with the bishop. And if it goes, it can try this way, but I'm moving. It can come in here. It can't come this way. It can't go that way. No, it can't because I'll go here with the idea of bringing the bishop here. So the knight has to come this way. That way it can't be harassed and it can stop the bishop from coming to h2 and stop the pawn. But it's putting pressure. Now this would allow my king to come in from b3 to c4 to d5. And black is under heavy pressure because this king is way offside. But I didn't do that. I went rook to h6, dodging the trade. Black went bishop f8. Rook e6, trying to put pressure on the e5 pawn. Bishop g7, protecting the pawn. Hitting the bishop. Black plays knight d5. I go back, rook d6, threatening the knight. Knight to f4, hitting my bishop. I move the bishop to e4, putting pressure on b7. Rishi plays knight e2 with the idea of forking me. Knight c3, hitting the bishop and the king. Move the bishop out the way, and he forks me this way. Knight c1. So I step the king over, so when he takes the bishop, the rook can't drop in. Knight captures, pawn captures. Rook f7, hitting my pawn. I step the king over, protecting the d pawn so that won't fall when he captures. And here I play a6. My idea is if b captures a6, then I hit him with a check on rook to d7, and I pick up the bishop and get my piece back. So he can't capture that. So he played rook f7, swinging back. A captures b7, rook captures b7. Rook e6, putting pressure on that e pawn once again. King b8, he wants to walk around and try and get his king into the game and run my rook off. So I just start pushing my a pawn. King c7, a5. He go rook a7, trying to stop the pawn. Now I got the pawn to a6. At this point he panicked and he offered me a draw, but I declined. I felt like I was winning and I had two passed pawns. Even though he's up a piece, I got two passed pawns. I'm trying to see if I can get my king moved up and promote one of my pawns for a queen. King d7, rook to g6, hitting the bishop. King to e8. And here, Stockfish is saying g5. It wants me to push g5. And it still got black as having an advantage by 0.17. So it shows you here, even though you may think you have a favorable position, when the world of chess engines, even if you think you're winning, you might not necessarily be winning. So that's one thing you gotta try not to do. Over evaluate your position and think you have a winning position when you don't. But I really like the position here, and I thought I would be able to get something going with one of these pawns. So rook to b6, and my idea is to drop the rook down with a check, and then if the king steps up, come to rook b7 with another check. Rook captures, pawn captures, and then the b pawn promotes to a queen if the king stays over trying to protect the bishop. King d8, but he moves closer this way instead of towards the bishop. I was hoping he moved towards the bishop, then my idea would have worked. But he moves this way. He saw what I had in mind. So king b3, start moving the king up. King c7, and here he offered another draw. And this time I figured that there's no way I can get my king in. He's just going to keep harassing my rook with his king. And I wasn't dropping the rook back, giving up my a pawn, because that's where my leverage was. So I went ahead and accepted the draw. So they're giving me my first draw. And I believe that's the conventional wisdom in chess. When you're in a tournament and you start off bad and have a couple of losing games, get a draw, stop the bleeding, and then go for the win next game. Alright, thank you YouTube for watching. This is Carlos the Rook. Hit the like button and subscribe. Support the channel. Thank you. Have a nice day.